Hey there, Merry Christmas, and welcome to Anchor Church's online Christmas service. We're so excited you decided to spend the next 30 minutes with us talking about the subject of rest today. And we're also going to be able to hear from Matt, who came to know Jesus a few years ago, and he's sharing his story. And then we get to hear from Anchor Worship. They put together a really nice Christmas song for you today. So let's get started.
So, I was born into a very devout, Roman Catholic family. It was a very, very conservative church that I grew up in. As a child, I loved going to church on Sundays. It drew me in, just, looking at the stories of the Bible represented in the stained glass windows. And then as I got older and I went into college, I started questioning things even more. And we would have these conversations and, they would ask me why I, had the faith that I had. Why did I believe these things? And I started questioning more and more and more. And I really didn't have anyone I could go to and ask when I had doubts about my faith. And so I started developing a real kind of fatalistic attitude about things. If there's nothing, then nothing matters. That type of belief in my life started making me more cynical about things. And it ended up to a point where on Christmas Day, my wife had enough of me. And so I moved away from my family and moved 100 miles away to the town where my job was at. And my job had been, my God, and I was focused on that and devoted everything to that. I was miserable. I came to the realization that I was this broken and empty vessel. So when things were at their worst, I received this flyer in the mail about going to church. And surprisingly, I went. And when I arrived in the parking lot, the first person that I saw there was a good work friend of mine. And I just remember just feeling this relief. Okay, at least I know one person here. At the end of the service, the worship team came back on, and this type of worship was completely brand new for me. Growing up in this conservative Catholic church, and it was just so joyful, that type of worship. And the song they sang, started off with, I surrender, and I realized, all along I had been fighting against, I had lost my faith because I'd been fighting against it, and I just needed to surrender. And at that, I felt full of God. And since that day, even my journey with God has been, sometimes, I'll take steps towards Him and steps away from Him. But ever since then, I have felt I had aligned myself correctly the way that my life should be. And regardless of wherever I've been in my life, I know that as long as I decide to turn and face God, then it's going in the right direction. And I am safe in the sense that my soul is safe because it is with God.
Well, thank you so much, Matt, for sharing your story. Right now, we're going to hear from Nick, and he's going to be talking about the subject of rest and how it affects every single day of our lives and how rest can change your life if you put it into practice this Christmas season and beyond.
I've got a question for you. Do you feel busy right now? I'll tell you, for me, I think I was born addicted to busy. The summer after second grade, I had so much going on, I had to organize all my stuff into a schedule. In fact, I'd get up and I'd want to work on my logic building, right? And my problem solving. So I'd watch Blue's Clues. Then after that, I would spend an hour working on my number book. You see, this needs a little explaining. I had one day where I wrote out my numbers 1 to 100, and I felt so good about myself. I had this question, what if I went further? And so I wrote out to 200 and 300 and 400, then to 1,000, 2,000, 10,000. And so every day I was logging in my numbers. After that, I would be so tired that it would be done with number time, and then onto a quick lunch because I didn't have much time to have a full-on lunch, so it was the handy-dandy Chef Boy RD that took care of me because after about 1 minute and 15 seconds in the microwave, I was ready to scarf it down and get on with my day because I was too busy. So the problem happened when 3rd grade came, and I was going to try to fit school into everything else I had going on. The other problem was that 3rd grade was a lot harder than the 2nd grade. Because in 3rd grade, they had us reading chapter books. And they would even have us do oral book reports. Do you know how hard it is for a 3rd grader to stand up in front of their class and say what they read when they only read the first chapter of the book? I mean, that's where I was. I was standing up in front of the class, shaking profusely. And I had to retell the story based off of just the little bit that I read. And so I said, there was a guy who wanted to climb a mountain, and one day he went to climb a mountain, and he got lost. The end. And I was just petrified. After saying the end, I paused for the longest pause in my entire life. I looked out, expecting to be busted. But what I saw shocked me. The class was mesmerized. They were taking it all in. This one girl raised her hand and she said, wait. So did he make it back home? And at that moment, I'm racking my brain. What do I say? Did he make it back home? I don't know if he made it back home. And I just split out. I said, uh-huh. And then I sat down. And if that girl, if you're listening right now, I have a confession. Even to this day, I don't know if the guy made it back home. I don't even know if he made it up the mountain. So here's the problem we all have, is we tend to get busy with our own version of Blue's Clues and ravioli, and then we tend to do stupid things, right? You know, I don't know about you, but maybe for you, you're addicted to busy, and you just can't pull yourself away from work, and you're constantly checking your phone. Or maybe for you, you're a student in school, and it just feels like every semester gets harder and harder, and you just finished up one semester, you just got your finals for one semester, and you're looking to the next semester, and you know that it's going to be more demanding of your time, and you don't think you're going to make it past one more semester, let alone graduate. Maybe, for you, Christmas time is one of those few times in the year where you actually connect with your spouse and your family. And deep down you know that it's your busyness that is destroying your family. You see, we all can get busy with different things. And so what I want to do for you right now is I want to actually offer you your very first Christmas present of the year. I want to give you permission to take a break. In fact, if you find yourself obsessed to be the best, stressed at every request, if you find yourself pressed and distressed, there's one thing I want you to know, and that is you are blessed when you rest. You see, just like oxygen and deodorant, rest is not an option. But you already know that, right? You know that rest would be great, and it would be so nice to take a break. And so what we want to talk about today is we're going to talk about how do we rest? So the first way to rest is going to be pretty obvious, and so I don't want to insult you by saying this, but I know it needs to get said, is you need to work less. Maybe for you, you're so tired because you're just working too much. In fact, a Stanford study showed that the more hours working does not mean more productivity. So they actually showed that after 50 hours of work in a week, our productivity drops dramatically. That by the time you get to 55 hours in the week, any more working is virtually pointless. And so what does that mean for us? That means that we have limitations. That means we can't just keep working and working and working and getting more and more done. And I know that's a really hard truth for some of us to accept. I know for me, there was a time when I thought that anybody who took limitations seriously was weak. I thought it was a sign of weakness. And I was so inspired by these different megachurch pastors who seemed to be able to do everything. Like they can launch a church and in just a year it'd be thousands. Or they could read 500 books a year. Or they would spend 30 hours a week on their sermon, 30 hours a week caring for people, and 30 hours a week building into leadership. And I didn't know how it happened. And then they were able to be home at 4 o'clock every day sharp. And so to me, I gave into this delusion that I could do as much as possible and I didn't have any limits. And so I signed up for more classes and I attended more meetings and I said yes to more opportunities until eventually it started wearing away at my soul. And I was so tired and I was so stressed and I was so numb. And it was destroying me. You know, today, what's interesting is that a lot of those same pastors who inspired me have been fired from their churches. You see, they wore themselves out too much. And because of their exhaustion, they gave in to moral failure and lost the things that they built up. You see, we can't just go on working more and more and more, thinking we can live without limitations. In fact, I think that's what Luke is trying to tell us. You see, Luke was a doctor during Jesus' day, and he pulled together all these eyewitness testimonies and made an account of Jesus' life. And he tells about the story when the angel comes to these different shepherds working the night shift. And the glory of the Lord shone. And here's what the angel said. He said, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. Today, in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. And this will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." So Mary and Joseph couldn't find room in the inn, and so they set Jesus into a manger where he lied. And then the angel goes and he tells the shepherds, "You got to see Jesus. And you're going to know it's Jesus because it's the baby that's lying in a manger." And so Luke records, the shepherds went out and they went looking for Jesus and they found Jesus. And you want to know how they knew that they found Jesus? Was because they found the baby lying in a manger. Luke wants us to know Jesus was a baby who lied in a manger. Luke wants us to know that the Son of God left heaven and entered the world in a humble state. Luke wants us to know something really profound about Jesus, that he slept. You see, I don't know much about babies, but I do know that they tend to cry and they tend to poop and they tend to sleep. And Jesus cried and pooped and slept. You see, Jesus had limitations, and so do you. And if you're going to follow Jesus, that means you're following the man who launched this movement in which 2.3 billion people today devote their lives to. But he was also the baby who slept in a manger. You see, following Jesus is embracing your greatest limitations, or your greatest potential, and your daily limitations. Jesus. In Matthew 8, he was asleep and his disciples had to wake him up because the storm was coming in the boat. In Matthew 4, Jesus was tempted and he was hungry. In Matthew 24, Jesus admits that he doesn't even know when the world's going to end. And in Luke 8, Jesus is depending on donations from people like Joanna and Susanna. Jesus had limitations. It's what it means to be human, is to be limited. And so you have limitations. You can't just keep working and working and working and thinking it's going to work out for you. But there is good news. There is good news. According to Craig Rochelle, he says that limitation is the breeding ground for innovation. You see, if you want to find ways to solve new problems, you don't work in spite of your limitations. You actually lean into your limitations. For instance, with Anchor, we know that we're limited. We know that we can't do everything. And we're really passionate about getting together in groups and connecting in community. And we're really passionate about serving the community around us. And so what do? We are experimenting, we are innovating, and we're seeing what it's like to have a once-a-month service. Because we know that getting together in groups and serving the community have a way of transforming our lives that weekly events just can't do on their own. We know that we're limited, and so we are experimenting and we're letting limitations lead us to innovation. We have limitations, which means we need physical rest. And we can't have physical rest if we keep working. So we need to work less. In fact, your muscles can't grow without a rest day. Your mind can't grow without a rest day. Your productivity can't grow without a rest day. And so this year, for your New Year's resolution, instead of doing more, do less. Actually have a New Year's resolution that you're going to like. So make it your New Year's resolution to work less, to drop a class, to take a day off just to be lazy. And if you can't manage to be lazy, then make it a day off to have fun and make a memory. We need to work less. I know it sounds insane. It sounds un-American to say to work less. It feels like there's no way you can get ahead in life by working less. But you know that you are blessed when you rest. So you're going to work less. Now, we all know that physical rest is pretty great. And when you've worked so hard and you finally get a break, it's amazing. But I want to let you in on a secret. Because physical rest is not the only kind of rest there is. There's actually two kinds of rest. In Hebrews 4, 8 through 9, it says, For if Joshua had given them rest, God would not have spoken of another day later. So then there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. After 40 years in the wilderness, Joshua got the people of Israel, the Hebrews, into the promised land. Think about this. 40 years camping in the wilderness. I couldn't survive 40 days camping in a KOA, let alone 40 years camping in the wilderness. Rest would have felt pretty great. The promised land would have been spectacular for them. But what the writer of the book of Hebrews is saying is that physical rest, even though it was amazing, even though it was great, even though they had longed for it, was only just a taste. It was only just a glimpse. It was only just a shadow of some greater rest, the Sabbath rest, this other day, a spiritual rest. Do you know that you don't just need physical rest, you need spiritual rest? Have you not just felt so tired that it seems to go deeper than just a physical exhaustion? Have you felt what it's like to be spiritually exhausted? I know I have. You see, physical rest comes only when we work less. Spiritual rest, on the other hand, comes when we pray more. Because spiritual rest only comes from Jesus. Think about it. When the angel appeared to the shepherds, what did they do? They left their sheep and they went to Jesus. They worked less, they left their jobs for a moment, and they prayed more. They spent time with God. If you're familiar with the story, Martha, her problem was she was working too much and she was praying too little. And Mary is the one who got it right. Now let's look at what Matthew says, who is one of Jesus' 12 disciples, telling about the time that Jesus said this. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. You see, when ancient farmers were trying to train new, young animals like ox to plow the fields, what they would do is they would put them on a yoke with the older, more experienced animals. And so that way, the stronger, the older animals were able to take on the brunt of the load and teach and guide the younger animals. You see, what Jesus is saying is that you're being ridiculous trying to shovel the entire Walmart parking lot on your own when he's right there with the snowplow. Jesus is saying, I'm here to give you rest. You need to be yoked to me. Jesus is saying, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened by the bills to pay and the financial debt and the financial pressures you have on you, and I will give you rest. He's saying to you, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened by the insecurities from your last relationship, and I will give you rest. He's telling you, he's saying, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened by all the depression and the anxiety and the fears and the doubts and the pain and the loss and the grief and the addictions and the loneliness and the self-hatred. And I will give you rest for your soul. You see, we need physical rest, and that only comes from working less. But we also need spiritual rest from the heavy burdens we have on ourselves, and that only comes through time spent with Jesus. We need to be yoked to Jesus. We need to meditate and bask in the presence of Jesus. Every day, spend 5 minutes. Here's what you do. For 5 minutes only, imagine you're sitting in a room with Jesus. Use your imagination. Picture that Jesus is there physically with you. And maybe in that time, tell him what you're worried about. Or maybe in that time, don't say a word and just be with him. We need to be in the presence of Jesus. This incredible gift, this incredible present that Jesus has and he's offering you needs to be opened. He says, come to me and I will give you rest. I want to tell you one more story to tell you just how much I believe that you're blessed when you rest. You see, I already mentioned how there was a time when I was so stressed, I was taking on so much, I thought I could do anything, I could just work harder and harder and harder, and it left me an empty shell. I mean, I was constantly stressed, and I was constantly numb, too, when I wasn't stressed. You know what that did to me? That made me a lousy husband. What I didn't know was that for the first 5 years of our marriage, Hannah was unhappy. You see, at our wedding, I vowed to love Hannah, but I didn't tell her that she would have to compete for my love with my love for productivity. I didn't tell her then that she would have to always wonder if I was too stressed for her. She would always have to feel like she wasn't important enough to me. Until one day we took a trip to the Grand Canyon. And we had a good time. And we even spontaneously in the moment, we decided we're going to attack 1,000 miles back onto our trip. And we drove from the Grand Canyon to LA. And in that week, we laughed together. And in that week, we connected. You know, and a year later, in counseling, I discovered that it was that vacation that might have just saved our marriage. And if That's what rest can do for my marriage. What can rest do for your soul?
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you, at the end of Nick's message there, were just wondering what a relationship with Jesus really looks like, I would love to just chat with you. If you'd like to, you can just put a little note in the comments and we'll message you. I'd love to have the opportunity to walk with you about what a relationship with Jesus really looks like and what it can do for you today. If you are new to Anchor, a big thing that we do around here are called anchor groups. And so we have our new anchor groups launching in the new year. We are taking the month of December off, but we are back at it in the new year. And we have 3 different types of groups. So we have our online version through Zoom that's going to be focused on messages. Then we have our service group that is going to be serving all over Champaign-Urbana. And then finally, we have our Following Jesus group, and we are so excited for that. That's going to be basically teaching you how to follow Jesus. So if you're interested in that at all, feel free to click that link in the comments and we will contact you and give you more information. If you're looking to help the mission of Anchor move forward and help more people come to know Jesus and foster their relationship with Him, you can click the link in the comments to give to Anchor today. Thank you so much again for joining us, and Merry Christmas.